Thank you, Per Giorgio. Yes, the role of the tax advisor. It has been difficult already before all this. You have just been hearing the description of the world we live in as tax professionals, and we as tax advisors want to play our role in there. And it is difficult. And to explain that to you, I will have to show a bit of where we come from. I'm standing here as the president of the CFE, the European Federation of Tax Advisors. And traditionally, the tax advisors in Europe, I'm talking from a European perspective now, has had different roles, this tax advisor. A very important one, which was not always stressed because it was not so sexy, but it has become sexy now, is the support in compliance. A large part of the work tax advisors do is make sure that their clients are compliant. Mind you, our clients are multinational corporations and small companies, local, nothing international. Our basis, the tax advisors profession in Europe is very diverse. I'll tell you a bit more about that. Then the second traditional role is tax advice and tax planning. That was the sexy part. Until not so long ago, it would be considered a compliment by a tax advisor at a birthday party or some other social occasion, if tall stories could be told about how to minimize taxes legally. How has the world changed? In particular also, it was striking that in the session before us about ethics, the appeal was comply with the law, then you're ethical. We are one step further. Don't comply with the law because then you're not ethical enough. And then it becomes difficult for us traditional tax advisors who thought there was a sure safe haven, namely comply with the law. And then the third pillar of the traditional roles of tax advisors was the more lawyer kind of aspect to defend the taxpayer's rights or the taxpayer himself in and outside the court. These three different roles were played by different types of tax advisors. If we look at a country like France, where tax advice is traditionally the domain of lawyers, to a large extent also taken over by accountants, but at the level of, in addition to the traditional work. In some other countries, it is specialized accountants that are dominant in the area of tax advice. And then again, other countries where it is a separate profession and the tax advisors are neither lawyers nor accountants. And then in some countries it is a regulated profession, in others they are non-regulated or self-regulated. And all this, given also these very different types of clients that tax advisors are serving, brings out already before all the violence of what's now coming to us, a very diverse picture. So you, as a client, the answer to your question, what does my tax advisor do for me, will depend on the country where you're in. And if your base is in the UK, you might find it in your subsidiary in France or in Hungary or in Germany, the situation is very, very different. And traditionally, in some countries, the position of the tax advisor is much more into the area of compliance, and in a regulated environment, very much open to a position where the tax advisor becomes almost liable for the tax position of his client. In this area of compliance I'm now talking about is that you see two developments. On the one hand, the enhanced relationship, in which the compliance is done in a good atmosphere of trust between the tax authority and the company. But at the same time, the tax advisor, who is an intermediary in that process in many cases, tends to become a party who is responsible for what is happening. He is made a tax agent, so to speak, having a permission to file tax advice for his clients, but then has to sign off that he has investigated many of the things, and then helping the client with the tax control framework, for example, as has been mentioned, so that the client and his advisor can together take care of the compliance and file tax returns on which the tax authority has nothing to audit anymore, and the risk is shifted to the company or to its advisor. This position, almost as an assurance giver, is much easier accepted by tax advisors related to auditors by nature, because they are used to an environment like that. And this is something that our lawyer members in Europe really find an awful thing to look at. They think this is not what a tax advisor should do. Tax advisor should be independent. And then we come to the area of advice and planning. Is this still the same guy? He advises about structuring a transaction, tax planning for individuals, tax planning for wealthy individuals sometimes, but also structuring transactions with what we now call aggressive tax planning. Interest deductions, maybe in more than one country, we call it double dip. Things like hybrid mismatches, debt in one country, equity in the other. This was what we loved to do because it's technically very interesting. And what the treaties do, and used to do all the time, and what the OECD is now presenting like it's something new, saying that the profit should be taxed where it is made. Well, yes, that's what transfer pricing has always been about. There's nothing new there. There is plenty of reason for tax advisors to be very skeptical about the whole BEPS thing. I won't do that because where we might be skeptical on many of the things, the trend is what is important. And that's also what Fabrizio said. It is the trend that is there and that won't go away. These BEPS action plans may not become law in every country or in all the countries at the same time, but there is a trend. So the tax advisor in his area of advice and tax planning will have to deal with transparency, disclosure. And we also start giving advice on tax policy. That's new. We now have sections in the firms of our members where people advise on what is responsible tax. And that may be different in different countries. How about privilege, the client-attorney privilege situation, where the advisor is a lawyer, where the advisor is an accountant? How do we go about that? The advocacy role of the tax advisor might be reduced because of all this. On the other hand, you could say there is still the need for that, so it will be separated, split off from the rest, and that is a trend you could expect. I don't know whether it's going that way, but that the different roles will be split in compliance, whereby software will take over a lot of the work of the tax advisors. Those tax advisors that are mainly doing compliance and filing tax returns should be careful of that. Tax planning will be reduced and limited and more specialized because technology plays a huge role in tax advice. Big data has been mentioned. We see tax advising firms around Europe hiring mathematicians instead of tax lawyers to work in tax. And the advocacy role might go more towards lawyers, and others might even deliberately want to step away for it because they get more into the area of compliance and assurance. As said, I don't know whether it is the way we go. The differences in countries are huge. My time is up, so I stop here. Thank you.